Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hope you're all having a great, or you had a great day. Is our last and final discussion of the 1619 project. And we can finally say that we have officially finished reading this book together. So today we're going to be discussing chapters 16 through chapter 18. So the last three chapters of this book, which was very informational. Some things I knew about, some things that I didn't know. And so, like, the first chapter we're discussing is traffic about redlining, and this is true. In the first sentence of the chapter, it says Atlanta has some of the worst traffic in the United States, which is true. I have family in Atlanta and Georgia, and the traffic is bad. Now I know in other states it's also just as bad too. So I'm not trying to count out any other states, but just Atlanta, I know for a fact that has like bad traffic. I know California does. I think Texas does. I'm trying to think of other states. New York. There's many. But it talks about redlining, and let's see. It says this common practice of steering new interstates through minority neighborhoods, rich and poor alike, was repeated across the South in cities like Charlotte, Houston, Jacksonville, Miami, Montgomery, Nashville, New Orleans, Richmond, and Tampa. But it was not simply a Southern phenomenon. Countless metropolitan areas throughout the country saw similar patterns, including Chicago, Cincinnati, Denver, Detroit, Indianapolis, Los Angeles, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Syracuse, and Washington. Activists it says activists in the capital decried the practice of white men's roads through black men's bedrooms, but the phenomenon nevertheless proliferated across the entire nation. And I have an example of that because I actually follow this IG account. Let me see if I can share it right here, where it talks about redlining. And like for this one where I mentioned Atlanta, we have this. This is 1951, and you can see how it changed dramatically. And this is 1989. Look at that interstate. It just took out so many different, like a neighborhood entirely. So here's a closer look right here, how much land it took and housing in the Black community, how much it took away from them. So this is just an example of 1955 into 1981 alone and what it has done. There's so many different examples that I could give you. Like we have Tulsa right here. This is 1953, and then you have 2008, and how the interstate is going through, a neighborhood and getting rid of a lot of housing. So I follow this account just to be aware of certain things. This is 1947. So here you have 1947, and now you have 1984. So you can see, like, this is redlining. It's real, still relevant today. Here's Brooklyn. Same thing. This is 1924 into 1984. Just look at that. It's crazy. You can just tell the difference in how like detrimental it was and how it just changed neighborhoods. Here you have 1940, and then look, this is 2019, and you don't have any of those brownstones or anything like that anymore. So it's accurate in what they were saying about redlining for this chapter. And I felt it bothered me, and it has caused so many problems into poverty and people not having homes. It says today, major roads and highways serve as stark dividing lines between black and white sections in cities like Buffalo, Hartford, Kansas City, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis, and so on. So we get into that. And it says, in the end, Atlanta's traffic is at a standstill because its attitude about transit is at a standstill 2 decades after its interstates were set down with an eye to segregation, and its rapid transit system was stunned by white flight. The city, like so many other cities across America, remains stalled in the past. And then we go into the next chapter, which talks about progress. We talk about progress all the time, especially during sprints, or we have these deep conversations about the government and politics and what in our government considers progress and what we consider progress. It talks more about like Trump's campaign, and pretty much the progress that has been made is starting to regress. And it goes into examples like, let's see if I can mention one in particular. Let's see. As you can see, I've been highlighting this book a lot as I was reading this for the last couple of chapters. Let's see. So for this one, it says inequality lives in part because Americans of every generation have been misled into believing that racial progress is inevitable and ongoing, that racial progress is America's manifest destiny, that racial progress defines the arc of American history since 1619, that things have changed dramatically. In fact, this has more often been rhetoric than reality, more often myth than history. Saying that the nation can progress racially is a necessary statement of hope. Saying that the nation has progressed racially is usually a statement of ideology, one that has been used all too often to obscure the opposite reality of racist progress. And it's been this way since the beginning. And then it goes more into the political standpoint. And like it says, still, slavery was a political, moral, and intellectual quandary for the founding fathers who saw themselves as part of the age of enlightenment. It says they were not so blinded by the myth of racial progress that they failed to understand the contradiction of a republic founded on the principles of freedom and equality, in which 1/5 of the population was held in bondage. They were embarrassed enough that they left the words slavery and slave out of the U.S. Constitution entirely. And then it goes into saying, in the aftermath of the American Revolution, many northern states that were less reliant on enslaved labor did pass gradual abolition laws, and some enslavers in the upper South did free their captives, but most in the South did not. Jefferson, who's still on our money, himself freed only 2 enslaved people in his lifetime. And I don't even know how many people that he enslaved, that he owned. I probably definitely will look it up. It says Americans in both the North and the South came to see slavery as a necessary evil, the only way to pay off their debts and build the new nation. So they enslaved people to create wealth for themselves, to create wealth for their family and generations to come. And we see this pattern, and you can see that now we've been wanting reparations, and they just will not give it to us. We think of like the Tulsa massacre and what was it? It was a dismiss. They dismissed the trial or whatever for the remaining survivors, which I think there's only 2 living right now, and they simply just dismissed the case entirely. So the last remaining survivors, one of the survivors, I forget her name, she is actually she is writing a book. It's going to be releasing, I think, either later in August or early September. So definitely get her book. Let me look it up right now so that way y'all can pre-order it or do whatever you need to do. Let me see. Yeah, but the lawsuit was dismissed. But yes, it says, this is by Viola Ford Fletcher. It says, "Don't let them burn my story. The oldest living survivor of the Tulsa Massacre in her own words." And this is the book right here. So there's that. I already pre-ordered my copy because I definitely want to read her book. But let's see. It goes into saying, let's see, that in the end, it was white people who righted the wrong of slavery. And to this day, they felt like they have done that, and really they haven't done anything. Let's see. It says the white leaders who advocated for Black men's right to vote absolved themselves of a continued commitment to overturning lingering racist policies and practices by reasoning that Black men could now save themselves and their families through the ballot box. For their own benefit, newly emancipated Black people should not continue to be kept wards of the nation, said reformer Thomas Wentworth Higginson, who had commanded Black soldiers in the Civil War. Or as congressional representative and future President James A. Garfield put it, the 15th Amendment confers upon the African race the care of its own destiny. So they pretty much were saying, oh, we don't owe them anything. We free them, so they're on their own. It says it places their fortunes in their own hands. It says these sentiments were widespread despite the fact that the formerly enslaved escaped their bondage with absolutely nothing. It says an Illinois newspaper proclaimed the Negro is now a voter and a citizen. Let him hereafter take his chances in the battle of life. From this point forward, white Americans were ready to blame Black behavior and not racism and the deprivations of 250 years of enslavement for persisting racial inequalities. So now they're justifying saying like, oh, we freed them already, so we don't owe them anything. They have to earn their own type of money in housing or whatsoever. But they were enslaved. You didn't pay them any wages, so how are they going to fend for themselves? And so eventually they start to do that. Like we had Black Wall Street in Tulsa, and you see what happened to that. They burned it to the ground. And there was no reparations for that, as we just seen like a week or two ago that they dismissed the lawsuit, and that the remaining survivors don't get anything, even though they lost everything. And so this is where this whole chapter comes in with racial progress, which it does. I think it's on page 435. It talks about the racial progress. It goes into example of the Montgomery bus boycott began a movement for desegregation across the South in 1955, and they said that racial progress. You have President Dwight D. Eisenhower sent federal troops to escort the Little Rock Nine in 1957. Racial progress. You have the lunch counter sit-ins by Black college students in 1960 led to the desegregation of Southern businesses. Racial progress. You have the Freedom Riders helped desegregate bus terminals in 1961. Then you have the March on Washington and the Dream of Martin Luther King Jr. made nationwide news in 1963, which was also considered racial progress. And then you have the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. So all this that was considered progress. And so but was left out of the story is that the second Reconstruction was needed because the first Reconstruction after the Civil War ended in 1865 failed to bring into being and sustain an equitable nation, an effort undermined by the propaganda of racial progress. What is left out of the story of our time is that a third Reconstruction is needed because the second Reconstruction failed to actualize King's dream, again undermined by the racial progress propaganda. And even this quote by Malcolm X, I even wrote it. I said, he makes a point with a statement when he visited Congress. The meeting of Congress of the racial equality at a Methodist church in Cleveland. He said, how can you thank a man for giving you what's already yours? He asked, speaking of the Civil Rights Act, which was making its way through Congress at the time. He also stated, you haven't even made progress. If what's being given to you, you should have had already. That's not progress. And so he makes a point. There's more things that need to be done, like reparations, and that still isn't happening. So then we go into, this statement about how racism will not be a thing. It will disappear. It will no longer be an issue because we have righted our wrongs. And so this is on page 438. It says, on January 10th of 2000, the Harvard University sociologist Orlando Patterson guaranteed that by 2050, the United States will have problems of plenty, but no racial problem whatsoever. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor cut that time period in half in a 2003 case upholding some forms of affirmative action in university admissions. And she stated, we expect that 25 years from now, she wrote, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary to further the interest approved today. And then it says the election of Obama in 2008 became the final proof to some that the United States have achieved the ultimate victory of racial progress, the end of racism. And nope, it's 2023. And obviously, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor was completely wrong, in my opinion. I mean, it's 2023. She stated that in 2003. She said 25 years which, I mean, racism is still alive and going, as we can see from what's happening in Texas, Florida, all across the country. And especially when it comes to Black history and how they don't want it to be taught, but then they have this way of teaching it, saying that, they learned a craft or whatever to defend themselves. So, it helped them. They didn't ask to be enslaved. So just the rhetoric of that alone was just devastating. And then we get to the final chapter. Let me look in the comments real quick in the chat. Hey, Pat, supporting your sister. Thank you so much. The area where Central Park in North New York was owned by Black people and sold short. Yes, it was. It was a Black community, and it's crazy how big Central Park is, and just imagine a community being there. And I just don't know why. Like, I hear people talking about it, and I wonder if they're going to do anything about it. Central Park is Central Park. It pretty much gives New York money because of tourists and stuff like that. But yeah, that's a great example, Pat. Hey, I just got out of work, but I'm here. Hey, Elises, I'm glad you made it out of work. Let's see. Hello. From a power nap. Oh, that sounds amazing. Started Ink Armor by Helena Hunting. Okay, yeah, we're first. This is the 1619 Project live discussion that I'm talking about right now. I'm not doing sprints at the moment. I probably won't be having sprints tonight though, because I'm a little tired myself. But we're talking about the last 3 chapters of 1619 Project, and how reparations needs to happen in order to solve the gap, this wealth gap. Listening to next door. Okay, sorry. Oh, no worries. It'll happen a little later. Yeah, it may happen, may not. We'll see. It might happen. Who knows? But yeah, so this last chapter we're talking about justice, and this was a chapter written by the author Nicole Hannah-Jones. And she pretty much was talking about the origin and stories, and put all the stories together in one chapter about there's still progress that needs to be made, and reparations has to happen. So let me see if I can find. I'm trying to see, because it gave me numbers of certain things as far as reparations, how it can be done, and what else needs to be done. It says, let's see if I can find it. Free people. Yes. Okay. So it talks about how having land. So this is on page 460. It says slavery is receiving by irresistible power the work of another man, and not by his consent. The freedom, as I understand it, promised by the Emancipation Proclamation, is taking us from under the yoke of bondage and placing us where we could reap the fruit of our own labor, take care of ourselves, and assist the government in maintaining our freedom. The key to that, Fraser said, was land. The way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and turn it and till it by our own labor, that is, by the labor of the women and children and old men, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. We want to be placed on land until we are able to buy it and make it our own. And then it goes to say, remarkably, with millions of Black Americans just weeks being released from generational slavery, they did not seek a government handout, even though getting land that they'd worked in order to produce wealth for others could hardly be considered one. They simply asked for land to work until they could earn enough money to purchase it. And then it says 4 days later, Sherman issued Special Field Order 15, providing for the distribution of hundreds of thousands of acres of former Confederate land in 40-acre tracts to newly freed people along coastal South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. This became known as the 40 Acres and a Mule. And then, of course, that was taken away. It says some 40,000 freed people staked their claim to 400,000 acres of Sherman land in a region, FONA rights, that had spawned one of the wealthiest segments of the planter class. But then we have Andrew Johnson here. And it says, Andrew Johnson, the racist pro-Southern vice president who took over, immediately reneged upon this promise of 40 acres, overturning Sherman's order. Many white Americans felt that Black Americans should be grateful for their freedom, that the bloody Civil War had absolved them of any debt. And then it states, the government confiscated the land from the new formerly enslaved families who had started to eke out their life away from the white whip and gave it back to the traders. And with that, the only real effort this nation ever made to compensate Black Americans for 250 years of chattel slavery ended. So, can you imagine if we had 40 acres right now of land? Like, we all would be set. We all would be good. You know? I don't understand why they can't do that. They have specific funds for every single thing, and reparations is not one of them. I don't understand it. I would love if there was reparations, but we're still fighting for it to this very day. It's 2023. Let's see. Then it goes into saying, let's see. Okay, so for this one, this is on page 464, which I even wrote, and it says, this pisses me off. Hold on, let me see this. These last few chapters are powerful, have so many thoughts. Truth be told, I think a lot has been lacking in messaging. We need to center the talk around unifying rather than different plights. Yeah. The laws written against Black folks are laws used to keep all minorities down, minorities of color. Yes, I agree. They still do this to the very day they make, and as we speak, for the presidential election, or just to vote, they're trying to make laws and restrictions in order for people not to vote. And I don't understand. It's really just backwards how this country was written, for everyone is created equal, yada, yada, yada. But when it comes to minorities, they want to renege on that statement. Because even for this, it says from 1868 to 1934, the federal government gave away 246 million acres in 160 acre tracts, nearly 10% of all the land in the nation, to more than 1.5 million white families. It says native born and foreign. It says some 46 million American adults today, about 20% of all American adults, are descended from those homesteaders, according to research by the social scientist Trina Williams Shanks. So they were given land. But when it came to the enslaved and minorities, no, they didn't give them nothing. It says, if that many white Americans can trace their legacy of wealth and property ownership to a single entitlement program, married rights, then the perpetuation of Black poverty must also be linked to national policy. And it says the federal government turned its back on its financial obligations to 4 million newly liberated people, and then it left them without protection as well, as white rule was reinstated across the South starting in the 1870s. Federal troops pulled out of the former Confederacy, and white Southerners overthrew biracial governance using violence, coups, and election fraud, which they're still doing to this very day, election fraud. I'm just trying to figure out what can we do. We have a lot of people in Congress now who needs to just go have a seat somewhere else. I think there definitely needs to be some type of rules regarding how long you can have a seat or be in the government. We have a lot of people that have been in the government since, who knows? I forget who the oldest person is actually, but it's like, y'all need to go, because we're still living by these old laws and we're still moving like we did years and years ago. And it seems like we're at a standstill. And, we saw affirmative action. We've been seeing with our own eyes what they've been doing. And all the progress that has been made, they're trying to regress and go back, as we see with Ron DeSantis, as we've seen with so many other people in our government. But the main issue is the wealth gap, which it goes into the last bit in the chapter of justice. So let's see. How in one breath it was acknowledged that Jewish folks should receive reparations, while reparations for descendants of enslaved people were slashed and devolved. Yes, and that it mentions that too. I even mentioned it to my husband Keandre about it. It says, this is on page 473. It says, this country can be remarkably generous. Each year, Congress allocates money. It says in 2020, $5 million to help support Holocaust survivors living in America. In backing the funding measure in 2018, Representative Richard E. Neal, a Democrat from Massachusetts, said that this country has a responsibility to support the surviving men and women of the Holocaust and their families. And it says he is right. It is the moral thing to do. This country has also paid reparations to Japanese American victims of internment during World War II and to some Native American nations. But it says there are living victims of racial apartheid and terrorism born in this country, including civil rights activists who lost their homes and jobs fighting to make this country a democracy, who have never received any sort of restitution for what they endured. So they get to pick and choose who they want to give their money to, who they want to give money to. It says, I don't think land is the answer. It's stolen land. That's true. It's stolen land. It's not even their land. But they created these laws where it was theirs for the taking, and they took it. I don't just imagine if we, from that standpoint, how they took land from other people, and there was some type of law that was written saying they would have to give it back. Man, that's a lot of land they would have to give back in return to the people that lived on that land. But they're making laws, and there's laws in place to make sure that never happens. However, they can print money without an issue. Print the money. Right. They'll print the money. They're just going to give it to what they want, distribute it to whoever they want. Let's see. And here are answers to reparations. So they're talking about how reparations can happen. This is on page 472. So it says, reparations are not about punishing white Americans, and white Americans are not the ones who would pay for them. It does not matter if your ancestors engaged in slavery or if you just immigrated here 2 weeks ago. Reparations amount to a societal obligation in a nation where our Constitution sanctions slavery and Congress passed laws protecting it, and our federal government initiated, condoned, and practiced legal racial segregation and discrimination against Black Americans until half a century ago. And so it is the federal government that would pay. And so it says, nor is it impossible to figure out who is eligible. It says reparations would go to any person who has documentation that he or she identified as a Black person for at least 10 years before the beginning of any reparations process and can trace at least one ancestor back to American slavery. Reparations should provide that's one thing I have to say, is at least can trace at least one ancestor back to American slavery. That's when we would have to do our research. And for some families, that is hard to do because there was no documentation. There was none. Back. They weren't able to read. They weren't able to learn to read or write or anything. There's some that taught themselves, but for some families, I know that's probably going to be very, very difficult. So there'll be a lot of digging and trying to figure out, their ancestors. Which that's another problem is a lot of our history is lost, and so I feel like that would be a difficult part. But I feel like eventually, I think there is some type of way where we all can figure out who our ancestors are. It is going to take some time. But then it says reparations should provide a commitment to vigorously enforce existing civil rights prohibitions against housing, educational, and employment discrimination, as well, including targeted investments in Black communities, segregated through government policy, and the segregated high poverty schools that serve a disproportionate number of Black children. But critically, reparations must include individual cash payments to descendants of the enslaved in order to close the wealth gap. We must stop thinking of restitution for slavery as a zero-sum game. As this book has shown, the legacy of 1619 has harmed all Americans, and we are all suffering for it to some degree. In addition to reparations, our wealthy nation is morally obligated to do more for all Americans who struggle by adopting such things as a livable wage, universal health care, child care, and college, and student loan debt relief. We can acknowledge our need to better support all of our citizens and also the particular debt owed Black Americans. And to be honest, they don't want to put in the work. That's honestly how I feel. They do not want to put in the work, even just for us to get loans for a house or whatever. They make it hard, or just to go to school. So it says, let's see. Black college graduates are about as likely to be unemployed as white Americans with a high school diploma, and Black Americans with a college education hold less wealth than white Americans who have not even completed high school. It says further, because Black families hold almost no wealth to begin with, Black students are the most likely to borrow money to pay for college and then to borrow more money in total. That debt in turn means that Black students cannot start saving immediately upon graduation, the way their less debt burdened peers can. It said it's not a lack of home ownership. While it's true that Black Americans have the lowest home ownership rates in the nation, simply owning a home does not have the same asset value as it does for white Americans. Black Americans get higher mortgage rates even with equal credit worthiness, and homes in Black neighborhoods do not appreciate at the same rate as those in white areas because housing prices are still driven by the racial makeup of communities. So a lot of things need to be written. We go into this example. It says, yet most Americans remain in almost pathological denial about the depths of Black financial struggle. That 2019 Yale University study discussed in the Misperception of Racial Economic Equality found that most Americans believe that Black households hold $90 in wealth for every $100 held by white households. The actual amount is $10. About 97% of the study participants overestimated Black-white wealth equality, and most assumed that highly educated, high-income Black households were the most likely to achieve economic parity with white counterparts. That is also wrong. The magnitude of the wealth gap only widens as Black people earn more income. So, as this last chapter was just giving examples, this is we have a long way to go. A long way to go. Let's see. Same in UK, the Woodrush generation is fighting for what's owed for cleaning out and rebuilding England. It's just, how come they can't just give us the money? Like, where it's not a handout, it's what's owed. You give reparations for other things. I mean, we give money to other countries to support them when they're at war and stuff like that. Like, how come you can't support your own citizens, especially the Black community and minorities, the indigenous people whose land that was stolen from them, which they should get back? Like, progress needs to be made, and it seems like it's slow. We're slowly getting there, but then we're like taking 5 steps back. A lot of land, also gold and diamonds, etc. Yes. Like, I was just talking to Keandra, is like, I would love to have, even if we didn't have our house that we want just yet, it would be nice to have some land. Just to say, it's ours. And we can do whatever we want with it. I would love to have some land. I would love to be able to live my life without worrying about, somebody judging me because of the color of my skin. But I know racism, it's, unfortunately, I feel like it's always going to exist. Especially on how, especially our government and how they think about things and the way they approach certain matters. Sorry I'm late. I'm trying to put together yard stuff and lost track of time. Hello, everyone. Oh, you're fine. You're all good. I've just been literally reading off of the book because this book has been very informational and phenomenal. Like I said, there are some things that I knew and some things I clearly didn't know. And it's a shame how, like, I know this book is considered to be one of the banned books that they don't want people to have access to or anything like that. And I appreciate it. Like, as you can see, I tabbed it up and everything. And I, eventually if my kids are interested, when they get older, and if they want to learn more about this country, about the history of this country, they can do so. Because right now this country is in denial about a lot of things. And literally in this book, it's not trying to punish anybody, but it's for everyone to be educated and for everyone to be aware of the founding of this country, what they have done. And I feel like if they acknowledge what they've done, and another way for acknowledgement is also for reparations as well. And it seems like they don't want to acknowledge it at all. We're not trying to make them feel guilty or anything like that. Just acknowledge the wrong that you have done. And it seemed like that's to be the most hardest thing they can possibly do. Because they don't want to. They don't want to admit to the fact that this country was built on blood and genocide. Yeah, they don't. They're embarrassed. And some probably aren't embarrassed. They're probably happy that that happened, to be quite honest with you. There are some really crazy people in this world, especially in this country. Um, don't be yawning over there. Can you hear me? Oh, he's ignoring me. He must have his AirPods on. But what was y'all overall thought about this book? Um, I enjoyed it. It had me pissed majority of the time. Um, it had me wondering about my ancestors. It made me think about my great grandmother who was Blackfoot, and I don't know anything else about her. I know mostly about my ancestors from my father's side, but not on my mother's side. I know when it comes to my father, um, we came from my father. They were in Georgia, um, and then my grandfather and his family they left Georgia and moved here to Ohio during the Great Migration, or whatever. Um, and from what my grandfather told me from his ancestors before they moved up here, that we're from Benin, which was one of the areas that the Portuguese had went to in order to capture and enslave people. So it makes me want to explore my ancestry and do a little bit of researching and digging. Um, it made me think of like how come this country doesn't understand like what y'all did was wrong. Like I I I don't understand. It's hard. It just saddens me how this happened. It's all started in 1619 and it's now 2023 and we're still like into this cycle. Like I don't understand. Hi all. Not to place a minority against another minority, but since Asian Americans fought to get rid of affirmative action, that means they don't need it. So the descendants of the Japanese Americans who receive reparations should be okay with paying the money back adjusted for inflation. This can be used to assist with funding reparations for American descendants of slaves. You know they ain't gonna do that. But you know they ain't gonna do that. They're gonna keep that money. They're gonna keep it. Like they still look at us as if we're not humans, as if we are not citizens in the US, which is hilarious to me. We were born here. I was born here. I'm a citizen. I got my ID. I got everything I need that says I'm a citizen of this country, and yet I'm not treated as such. This is just sad. So sad. Let me see. I'm just saying, yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm trying to think of other funds that like we just think about student loans. Those can't be forgiven, but when that PPP loan came and you had people in the government who said they had businesses and got that loan, but then also got those loans forgiven, but they can't forgive student loans. I find that just interesting. They're just hypocrites. Like we still have money of men who enslave people. Like they're the mug is on there. They don't see anything wrong with that at all. There's still monuments and statues of them too. It's like during this when this country was founded, from England, they came here and then they wanted to separate themselves from England to become America because they wanted to get away from the king and his rule and stuff like that. The whole thing. They just wanted to break away from England, which you have the American Revolution and so on. But yet they wanted to be free, but then they wanted to keep people and enslave people in order to create some type of wealth since they stepped away from their home and decided to come over here and take people's land and just fuck everything up. If I'm gonna say it blatantly, just fuck everything up. Sometimes I wonder I don't know. It makes me wish if I could go, if I was able to like time travel and just watch everything happen, and like if I just did something like for example, like I know this is way to the left, but like Outlander, how Claire went into Scotland and she was able to help Jamie or whatever, in order to make a difference for the future and help him with his decision making and stuff like that. Sometimes I wish I could do the same thing and be like, don't do that. Don't don't give them your goods for weapons. Don't do it. Don't do it. They're trying to make you seem like they're your friend, but they're not. I'm so happy we slow read 1619. This is a book that I will keep forever. It's also highlighted and written in from the beginning to end. Yep, I wrote in it. I tabbed it. I highlighted the crap out of it. Like, this is a book that I'm gonna keep forever. This is always going to be on my shelves because it's information that we're able to have and have access to, thank goodness. And I'm just glad that we read this together. I'm also grateful that we also slow read this because there is no way I will be able to digest all of this just in one sitting. I would go crazy. I was still going a little crazy when I was reading it because I was just so upset of how far this country seems like it's made. And then yet again, we see all this stuff happen in this year alone with the Supreme Court and their decisions and how to tell women what to do with their bodies. It's just a mess. It's a hot mess. We will never acknowledge racism as a people until we acknowledge what happened. This is why they want to teach their children that slavery was good for African Americans. I still can't believe that crap, what they're doing in Florida. And that's bull crap. That's not true whatsoever. It's so whitewashed. It's just, how can you say that when it's not true? Can't they get sued for misinformation at this point? Like, sometimes you just gotta shake your head because the words I want to say it's not good, and I don't want to say it on the internet. So many people have been repressed, disenfranchised. People have been killed, slaughtered. Families were separated, which has affected Black families for generations and is affecting families. What has happened in the past is still affecting the Black community and minorities to this very day. We talked about the wealth gap, and it's a huge gap. It's not no small gap, it's huge. And it bothers me. It just makes me look at it. It's like they don't want to see us win. They don't. Even though in order to get where they are now and for them to be as wealthy as they are, they did that on the backs of the people that were enslaved, of Black people, of minorities. They were able to get goods from the indigenous people and learn how to live off the land, and then literally kill them after they were, they helped them out with a new place that they had no idea about. It's like, they'll be nice, they'll be your friend, they'll use you for your resources, and when they're done with you, they literally just say F you. Take everything that you have, demean you, deprive you of things, kill you, like take away everything that you love and everything that you hold dear to you. And they don't see anything wrong with it. Not one bit. They don't you feel bad? Like, sometimes like, y'all are not human. Y'all have no type of humanity whatsoever. They're taking statuses down and renaming buildings from former slave owners who prospered in the UK. Yeah, they're still doing that here. I haven't seen any recent ones, And it just seems like, man, it's 2023. I don't even know. To be honest, I don't even want to know what it's going to look like in the next couple of years. I'm already struggling about just visualizing this presidential election right now, and I'm trying not to stress myself out about it because it's very worrisome. I think we should all refuse to pay taxes. That right there. I mean, we pay taxes anyways by just buying products. It's always freaking taxed. Why do we gotta pay you still? Oh, I know why we gotta pay you, because you have debts that you still need to pay, and so you're using everybody else to pay off your debts. We're never getting out of debt. And like you said, Elise, just print out some money, pay off the debt that y'all owe to all these different countries. Pay it off, pay them their debt, pay what's due. It seems like you always want to borrow people's stuff, or not borrow, excuse me, steal people's stuff and never want to return it. Don't want to give it back. No sort of repayment, no type of repayment whatsoever. Can you imagine what this country would look like if they give people what they owe and what's due to them, what they deserve to have? I think of like Lovecraft Country and how the second season was going to be. From what I saw, there was a map that was created of there was a map, and it had indigenous people were able to get their land back. So there was a certain part on the map of the U.S. where the indigenous people, they got their land back, and then you had in the black community, they were able to have their own land, and it was huge. Like you had the indigenous people, you had the black community. It was a huge. You saw the community on the map, and it was large. All the minority groups, all the minority, just their land was humongous. Like their land was just huge. And then you had white people, and their land was like this. And I feel like that was another reason why Lovecraft Country was canceled too, because they didn't want to see that shit. I mean, shoot, like they didn't want to see any, like they'll shut anything down that questions America and you know and their in you know in the way of life that they feel fit, or they consider their way of life. Um, I don't know. Sometimes I just think about what could have been different if different decisions were made. And yeah, it's just the whole country. Yep, the whole country. We shouldn't pay taxes. What are they gonna do? Like what they gonna take us all to prison? I mean, you have Trump that hasn't even paid taxes, and he living his best life. Can you imagine if none of us went to work? That means everything would stop, and no money would be made. That's pretty much what's happening in Florida with DeSantis, is what he's been saying. And so a lot of people, like immigrants and everyone else, they come together and they're like, we're not going to work no more. And so no houses are being built. The grocery stores are not being stocked whatsoever. Everything stops when people don't do certain things. Can you imagine if we just boycotted the entire country, just boycotted and said, no, we're not going to work today? I think about that all the time. We can't stop paying tax on products, so we can refuse to have taxes taken out of our paychecks. If a collective does it, all hell would break loose, right? If we dismantle, if we disrupt one little thing, it would collapse. Like the whole production industry, it would just collapse. You can't print out more money. It will place us in a depression for two reasons. One, money has no value. It is a promissory note backed by assets, mostly gold. You can't print out more than we have. That too. Please stop. Yeah, that's true. Well, what I've been also hearing is that in certain stores now, they don't even take money anymore. They don't take cash. It has to be card. So that's very worrisome itself. Like, I don't know. Like right now, this country is in shambles. It really is. We're not together. We're not a unit. It's not like unity is not a thing. It's just we are divided. And I wish we had some, like there is hope, But sometimes I feel like we just need that one person who will give us that hope. Like I know like in 2008 when Barack Obama ran for president and he won, everyone felt, including me at the time, like I felt like that this is it. And it was our like ray of hope that change is definitely happening, progress is definitely happening. But then after his presidency, it's just we regressed right back to the starting point. And it's like we keep regressing back to the starting point. Like there's still progress, don't get me wrong. But as you can see, poverty and stuff, it's rising, and they don't seem to have any type of solution at all. If you put too much money into the economy, the value of the dollar will decrease. Yeah, that is why third world countries need 1,000 of their country's dollars to buy a loaf of bread. It's just too much. Too much happening. It's a headache. Are you in my head? I swear I always say Obama was our yeah. He was. I mean, people went out to vote. I mean, Jason Reynolds, he wrote a chapter about when him and his mom went out to vote and stepping in line, and people that didn't was barely talking to people or whatever, they considered him this ray of hope, and it's like we need that ray of hope now. But this time I feel like we need to make some noise in order to retain this hope. But I have no idea, y'all. I don't know. I have no idea. In the head, I swear was it. We need another bomb war. MLK so divided. Yeah, we're divided, and I don't have no answers. There's a lot of things we could boycott and so on, but we would have to be willing. We all have to be willing to do it, because if we don't all do it, nothing's gonna happen. No change is gonna happen. It's a fear like everything else. We fall for it. Don't fall for the okie doke. we should read her book for book club and see what we think. She talks and I listen. It makes sense. It was so powerful back to 2008. I thought I was alone in that. Yeah. It was a sign of hope, and then it just went backwards, and then we're now in 2023, and look where we are right now. Just shaking my head. Sorry, give me a headache just think about it, because there's just so much stuff that needs to happen. So much. The promissory note does still exist. It is the basis of our financial industry, also partially the reason bank accounts are required to keep a certain amount of cash available in cash. I've heard a lot of people are starting to take their money out of banks right now because they're worried that banks are collapsing. I mean, just a few months ago, we saw that happening and people were freaking out. But I don't know. This was a great book. It was a great book. I'm glad they're talking about reparations. I feel like they need to still continue talking about it. I hope that there are some people in the government that are willing to talk about reparations. Like, you gave reparations to everyone else but the people and the ancestors that were enslaved. Something's wrong with that picture. I'm going to send you the link, Jira. Yeah. And you're talking about are you talking the book that I mentioned earlier? Are you talking about Viola Ford Fletcher, who is one of the survivors of the Tulsa massacre? Because yeah, that would definitely be a book that we need to read for sure. Definitely. It says Bitcoin played a huge factor in those banks failing. Oh yeah. I'm just ready to live my life. Sometimes I feel like I shouldn't have to go to a different country to live happily. Because I know every country has its issues. No country is perfect, mind you. But it just seems like right now, America, you ain't it right now. I need to read the last few chapters because I definitely forgotten to. But 1619 is amazing book, so impactful from the first page. Yeah, it is. Now I'm talking about the Yale professor. Oh, the Yale professor economics. Okay, can you send me the link to Ulysses? I'll definitely read that. Shoot, get all the information I need, and I don't know, hopefully, and just go from there. Because I'm just glad that we have this information in our hands. You know, I really wish people were open to learning about the history of this country and not listening to Ron DeSantis and other folks about the history of this country. Because they just don't want to face it. They don't. They want to ignore the problem, try to make excuses for it, trying to justify for it. They're trying to pull out all the stunts, and I'm just tired of it. That's why I try not to watch a lot of. I don't really watch the news at all. I usually watch this one guy on YouTube who gives me information about what the government's up to and decisions that's being made or whatever. But that's about it. I don't really watch the news because it's nothing but bad news. There's nothing good ever happens, and with the media and the news that we have, it doesn't even cover what everything else is happening in other countries. They don't want to show that to us. I don't need another Obama MLK. I need actual change. I need someone who's not afraid to step and break toes. Yeah, go against the grain. Yeah, Orange did a lot, and all of us sudden it can't be done. None of what Orange did has been reversed. Yeah, well, with Orange, he didn't care what people thought. He just did it, and he would tell you he was going to do it without hesitation. I will say that about him. We know who he was. We know what he was. We knew, but he would at least tell you to your face, like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing, and y'all ain't gonna stop me." That's who. Yeah, I agree with that too. We need somebody like that who definitely got backbone. Ain't gonna be a pushover. We can't have that. You better stand firm. What you believe, do what you got to do, and I just, I really hope that happens. Um, I know some people don't like Cornel less, but and I know he's for hold for party, which is not a popular party. He's not a Democrat or Republican, but I like what he stands for. I like his way of looking at things. Of you know, he was looking at it from both standpoints. Like no, Trump wasn't good. Biden, he has done some things, but there's still a lot to be done, and some methods that he's using that Cornel disagree with. Which there's some things I disagree with too. I mean, no one can be happy with whoever because sometimes they make good decisions, sometimes they make bad decisions. But I don't know. I know right now everybody's up in arms about the presidential election. Uh, so yeah, but I know that I'm still voting locally in my own state. Even though, yes, I live in a red state, which sucks. But I still try to do my due diligence. That's I know that what I can do my part. So yeah. I didn't know Bitcoin was a part of that. Bitcoin, like all stocks, should make a bank unstable. Shaking my head. Well, no thanks, Lucy. I won't read it. I'm sure the Yale professor has their hypothesis, but I'm pretty sure it's not an accepted theory. Economists always have opinions. That's why it's a social science. Ah, okay. I've been watching the news because your previous president was charged again. He did thing and told us about it, but all illegal stuff, nothing to do with the economy and fixing things. Yeah. Um, it shouldn't be, but the reality is that nursing homes, hospitals, and insurance companies are more closely regulated than financial institutions. A bank is never supposed to fail, but it did. That's scary. Ugh, man, I don't know. There's so many things happening with these investigations, especially Hunter, like his investigation too, and it just simply stopped for some odd reason. Like everybody's doing some dirty stuff. I'm not shocked. Everybody in our government, majority of them, they've done their dirt and probably still doing their dirt. We just don't know yet. It hasn't been uncovered yet. But what's done in the dark must come to light eventually. And eventually we shall see the truth. It might not be immediately, but I'm sure it will happen soon. OMG, I'm late and I see the reminder. I love your channel so much. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. We're about to actually wrap up. I'm just ranting about this progress that needs to be done and just thinking about the presidential election and all that good stuff that's happening in this country. Not really good, actually. It's just all bad. I just really want some positive stuff. And right now we're still in that negative space and division and stuff like that. And hopefully one day we can all come together and figure this shit out and actually like say, hey y'all, we gonna stop doing this. We ain't gonna show up to work this day. We gonna boycott this. We ain't gonna do, like. And I feel like once we come together and we have a goal that we all want to succeed in, I feel like, and when we all are ready to do it as a unity, as a community and our unity, I think we'll be ready. But first we gotta come together, y'all. We gotta come together because as the people of the U.S., without us, they can't create any more wealth because we're doing all the work for them. So we need to stop doing their work. Have them do it themselves, and then they will crumble. Insurance and hospitals have a lot to lose. They insured on top of more insurance to prevent it. Banks after 2007 recession with Bush bailout obviously didn't learn. Yeah. Just so many things are repeating itself, and that's what's scaring me the most. Because like I always say, history repeats itself, and it's up to us and the people we have in our government to break that cycle. But mostly it's up to the people because we have the power in our hands. We just don't realize it just yet. Banks are supposed to be absorbed by bigger banks. If a bank fails, it's due to their risky investments. Never due to banking. There are restrictions, only risky lending. Yeah, same. But I think that we're going to wrap it up. I'm glad to have read this book with y'all. This has been a journey for sure. It was very eye-opening. It made me be aware of certain things that I wasn't aware of, especially when it gave me examples and numbers as far as the wealth gap, reparations, what we see, what it could look like. It was just very informational and, like I said, very eye-opening to things that yet to have changed but needs to be changed and the progress that still has to be made. But I'm going to end this. I might do some sprints. It won't be long. It's 9:00, so I might do a couple of sprints maybe. So I probably will do some sprints tonight, just only for like maybe 2 or 3 sprints and then go to bed. But thank you all for coming. I will be having reading sprints, so don't go too far. I have to post it and then put everything together. So just give me about like 5 minutes or less to get it ready. And you said I vote for 45. Hold on, let me see. Sprint time. Oh my God. Exactly, Bree. Banks are never supposed to fail. If they do, it's because they are too toxic to absorb. Yes, friends, I vote for 45. Party time. Oh my God. I'll bring the wine. Oh Lord. Okay. All right. But anyways, thank you all for coming. Like I said, thank you so much for joining me with this slow read of the 1619 Project. This was just very informative, and I appreciate y'all for joining me. And I will see y'all in a little bit for reading sprints. But have a good evening, have a good night, have a good day, wherever you may be in the world. And I will see y'all later. Bye, everyone.